rounds out the Blue Marble Radical Cup.
The M-Zone Radical Cup Canada lineup is as follows. Gavin Sanders, Jake Cowden, Kenny Reedman, Connor Bell, Owen Clark, Nick Rusikoff, Chris Stiles, Stephen Chen, Robert Burgess, Peter Hansen, Mark Boyd, and Tim Sanderson, who had trouble in race number 2, will round out the M-Zone Radical Cup Canada, presented by Michelin. As you can hear the cars work through turns 9, 10, and 11 and out onto the front chute once again. And continuing under yellow, so starting this race under a yellow flag condition, essentially extended pace laps to give the drivers a little extra time to get some heat in their tires and get a feel for this surface.
So unlike the last couple of days, you'll see the Platinum cars stretch their legs, hopefully for the first couple of laps. I'm sure that we will see them catch the tail end of the fields, carve their way up, but hopefully we'll see some green flag racing from the get-go. Of course, it's been amazing action when we've been green. That's the drama of the street circuit. Can't always be green with no runoff. If a car goes in the wall, we've got to clean it up. But hopefully, the Blue Marble Radical Cup, the M-Zone Radical Cup Canada presented by Michelin, hopefully we'll get some good, strong racing here between the two classes. And very competitive in all of the classes, whether it's been the Canadian 1340 series, the American 1340 series. The Canadians have the blue on the rear wing, the Americans with the green, and the Pro 1500s with red on the rear wing and yellow with the Platinum class. That's the 425 brake horsepower, 380 foot-pound turbocharged SR10 machines. You can check out those because they've got the big nostrils in the front nose just above those big front splitters.
Yeah, there's not a lot of visual differences between all four divisions who are on track all at the same time. Again, horsepower being the one that will be underlined, and that's the Platinum class cars, who has so much more in the horsepower department as the pace car pulls in, and it looks like we are set to get some green flag action in here in the Blue Marble Radical Cup North America. The drivers leading them into turn number 1.
So the big question will be, will John Field be able to woe that powerful machine up, or will the other guys around him on the wet tyres do the job as someone trundles through pit lane, I believe? We're going racing, and already some action further back in the pack as Robert Cipriani has a big moment. John Field electing to keep it calm. He's back to third place as I think Indy Almiller or it was Schreiber taking the lead.
Well, you could see, you mentioned John Field is one of the drivers who was on slick tires. So he took some data in, some recon on those caution laps, and decided that turn 1 might be a little bit too dicey under hard braking. Turn 3 now looks like a pass on the outside.
It's Indy Miller who's taken the lead, and they're behind the front runners or the Blue Marble Radical Cup pack. You can see the Canadians coming through as well. So far, so good for these series in these trying conditions. Everyone making it through, and you can see a couple of drivers just tiptoeing around. Nick Persing's made a great start up and around a few of the cars there so early on. Persing in the number 19 doing the job for Cameron Racing in Pro 1500.
And that's not a bad idea. You see Nick Persing on the outside in some of these corners, and he's getting around the concrete patch. And the apex of some of these turns, turn 5, turn 8, has a concrete patch to the inside. That would be so slippery with any bit of moisture on it. Persing getting to the outside, plants those tires on the asphalt, and gets a good drive off.
Wild moment for Kevin Poitras as he put the power down in the 73 machine. You can see him coming into turn 1 there and through with the Canadian flag on the rear wing. Austin Riley having a look at the back of Greg Gorski. That's the fight for the Pro 1500s. And then we're back for a pass. The Canadians coming through as well.
And we can tell you, Jake Cowden has overtaken your pole sitter, and it looks like the 10 of Gavin Sanders has had some issue in the opening lap, unable to complete a lap so far. So Jake Cowden is your race leader in the M-Zone Radical Cup Canada. Connor Bell up to second in the Rye Spec number 15, and Kenny Reedman, fresh off a podium finish in race number 2 in the 42, is sitting in third.
Jake Cowden has been waiting for this moment. You could tell on the podium both days He wants to get the top spot. This could be his chance for some glory here on the streets of Toronto. As you say, Connor Bell, Kenny Reedman. Reedman's been on the podium so far, both races. This is going to be a cracker in the M-Zone Radical Cup Canada.
And we can tell you that Jake Cowden has actually just turned the fastest lap of the entire session, even quicker than some of the Platinum cars. So the number 9 is flying.
Yeah, and John Field struggling on those dry tires. So into turn 1, Indy Al Miller with Schreiber, Louis Schreiber having a look. You can see the sprint car star Wayne Williams closing in. The 73 of Kevin Poitras rubbing up against the wall on the exit, and then we're back to John Field. It looks like we may have had a position change. We have Greg Gorski's down into third. The hometown hero, Austin Riley, car 20 in the lead of Pro 1500.
Riley has been maintaining that distance behind the leaders and snatches a spot. It appears as though Greg Gorski has made a mistake somewhere around this circuit. Not bad enough to lose a lot of track position, but enough to lose 2 positions in the Pro 1500.
There he is, lights ablaze. Austin Riley with a huge gap, extending his lead. The kid who's going over to Silverstone in a couple of weeks to try it against the best in the UK in the Haggerty Radical Cup United Kingdom Series, is doing the business in Pro 1500. A huge lead over Mike Anzaldi. Gorski relegated to third, Persing up to fourth. That's good for his championship. We'll see the fight play out between himself and Jashelski, who currently sits fifth. Aurora Strauss relegated to sixth.
Talking about going over to England, Jake Cowden, one of the drivers of the Canada Scholarship Program, and went over and raced in England in the Formula 1600 class. He's put fenders on in a prototype style car in the M-Zone Radical Cup, and he is quickest of all competitors. As a matter of fact, Indy Al Miller just went a little bit faster this time, but that number 9 car has been the fastest of the entire group for most of this race so far.
And you can see these cars as the dry line starts to form around some of these corners. A number of cars still bucking around on the bumps here. Jace Bacon having a massive moment onto the main straight before. He sits third behind Robert Cipriani Dietrich. Seth Bacon, that's the top 3 in Pro 1340. Ken Savage running fourth. Hugh Leahy in fifth.
Now we're starting to see bits of sunshine on this racing surface, so that track is going to dry very quickly, and that will benefit the drivers who rolled the dice and put slick tires on their race cars to start this race. Look for drivers like John Field, and his lap times will start tumbling, start coming down as this surface dries, and you'll find more and more dry patches, especially in the braking zones. That's where it's key.
Now, I don't know much about the Michelin rubber. Perhaps you can tell us more. Certainly the Hankook wet tires will survive a reasonably long time in these conditions. Most of the time with wet tires, you need to find some water to cool the rubber blocks on top of the tire surface down. The Hankooks will run. Of course, they won't get the performance of the dries, as you mentioned before. But I think we're going to see an evolution of this race as the wet tires start to devolve and those dry tires really pick up pace.
Yeah, it's absolutely the same with the Michelin tire in the M-Zone Radical Cup Canada. The tires will degrade just a little bit. They're not going to lose enough rubber on there to suffer a puncture or just wear out right to the cords. They will maintain a level of consistency once they drop off, once those tires heat up and essentially the main blocks wear off.
And already the Platinum class cars starting to find some of the guys at the back of the Radical Cup Canada field. So now a new complicated scenario for those guys to deal with. And here we go, Indy Al Miller making the first pass on the 12 machine. And good job by that driver to stay out wide. Let Louis Schreiber through and let those guys get on with their race.
Wayne Williams flashes through. As you can see, the 16 of Hansen pulling in behind there as well. So he's towards the tail of the M-Zone Radical Cup Canada Series. So that's where the Platinum Cup cars are now pacing. And we can tell you that Austin Riley, with nearly, actually just a little bit more than a 6-second lead on Nick Persing, who has made it up to second spot. Danny Dashelski in third in class.
That was a pass for position down there. John Field defending hard from Kevin Poitras. Field's roll of the dice with the dry tyres hasn't played out so far.
He just went quickest to the other group, a 119, so they're starting to come in, but there's still certain areas where it's a little bit risky.
They're starting to come in, but he's a mile back from Indial Miller, and really when you think of the track position that he's lost, he's got a bit of work to do, but you can see how quickly he's now starting to pull away from Kevin Poitras, who goes through his shot there, and perhaps those slightly hard dry weather hand-cooked tyres, very durable tyre, which is why we chose them, have started to come into play. Of course, Radical Racing, all about keeping the cost relatively low in this very expensive sport called racing. And the idea behind these machines is to give guys a go, whether it's the young guns trying to make a mark for themselves, what we call gentleman drivers, although there's nothing gentlemanly about them, but the older guys who have been successful in life and finally get a chance to come out and try their luck at the passion they've so ever wanted to do since childhood.
And that's a battle for the lead. You see flashing through the screen, the lead in the Platinum Division, Indial Miller with about 0.4 of a second the last time they crossed the stripe, but Louis Schreiber in the 111 is right behind him. As a matter of fact, took a look on the outside in turn number 3. He is hounding Indial Miller, and Indial Miller made a big mistake in turn number 3. He goes very wide, and that's going to allow the 111 to soak up that distance between those two cars once again.
There's John Field coming. So have those hand cooks turned on. They have indeed. Awesome stuff as John Field really starts to hone in on the back, and you can see him sliding though. But look at the dry line. And Williams having a big lunge and a slide, as does the 37 as John Field. But this track is almost completely dry now. The guys on the wet tyres are really going to start to struggle. And interestingly enough, all of a sudden, the grip they had is going to turn into a horrible feeling. The blocks of the tyres are going to be walking around on the surface of that racetrack, and all of that confidence they had earlier in this race is going to start to feel like, for them, what it was like for the dry runners when it was in damper conditions.
John Field just went a 1:18.5. That is nearly 3 seconds a lap quicker than Indial Miller, who is the leader in the Platinum Division. So he has cut 3 seconds in one lap out of that lead by the 500 driver in the Platinum Division. So give you an idea, as Tom was mentioning, those dry tires really coming into their own. Jake Cowden continues to lead. Connor Bell, Kenny Reedman, Owen Clark, and Nick Rusakov in the M-Zone Radical Cup Canada Division.
Another big mover and shaker is Danny Dashelski up to P2. Behind, we've had an incident here coming onto the front straightaway. 2 cars involved.
That's Gavin Sanders. He's won 2 already this weekend in the M-Zone Radical Cup Canada. And just behind him is Hansen in the 16. So a little bit of banner stuck to the back end of the Sanders Motorsports number 10, but he'll pull away with the M-Zone sponsorship and a little bit of banner flapping in behind, but doesn't appear to be too much damage.
The second car didn't look too bad at all. Hopefully Sanders hasn't had a bent wing frame. Slow cars on the circuit right now. So we have got a full course caution out there. Obviously, even though the cars did get away from the scene of the accident quickly, race control doing the right thing, just calming everyone down. It's very blind around this circuit. And here's a replay. So what happens?
A nudge from behind. It looks like it was a logjam coming out of turn number 11. And I don't know if it was Hansen who got into him, and then Burgess came through and a touch. No, that's not Burgess. That's the 70 car of Owen Clark who made contact. So Clark was in third in class.
Owen Clark a bit unlucky there, and he said to me yesterday afternoon, I'm just trying to get through these races, really enjoying racing for the team. Of course, their typical driver, a pretty big incident on the front straightaway at Mossport or Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. in the opening rounds of the championship, and Owen stepping up and doing a tremendous job for a privateer team.
Yeah, he really is. He's getting a really good feel for these cars and coming into his own. This weekend, as a matter of fact, he's been at or near the top of the time charts. And there you look. Some of the drivers on those wet weather tires are searching out for that moisture, trying to cool off their rubber underneath, whether it's the Hankook tires in the Blue Marble Radical Cup North America or the Michelin tires in the M-Zone Radical Cup Canada, presented by Michelin, as Gavin Sanders does make a dart down pit lane.
Now, the other thing that has happened, I think, unfortunately, you could see that replay showed the rear wing of Sanders. It did fold back once it went into the wall, so his day is done. Danny Dyszelski has taken the lead in Pro 1500. Now, I wonder whether that was before or after the full course caution flags came out. It's quite conceivable that the race director will have to look at this. It might be under review, but at the moment, Dyszelski is back in command, and this is crucial for the 88. He's definitely seeking out some wet road. Everyone is. In fact, it's a little bit chaotic. People are under the safety car, but they're not in a single file.
No.
It's a little confusing down there. I'm sure it is for the drivers as well. You might be thinking someone's pulling over because they've have an issue. No, they're just trying to find some moisture.
One driver there almost took the runoff lane in turn number 1, seeking out that damp track because there's really not a lot of dampness left. You can see the sun is out. It's turning into a beautiful morning here at the Honda Indy Toronto. There's a little bit of dampness out on the outside of Lakeshore Boulevard, so the drivers almost brushing the wall, trying to cool down their tires during this caution period.
Dyszelski, this is a big moment for him, coming back after being involved in that incident yesterday. He was an innocent bystander, the third guy on the scene, and had to try and toss the car sideways to scrub off speed. It was still a heavy hit into the barrier. Luckily, a square one. They replaced the crash box, the FIA tested crash box on the front of these machines. He was A-OK, put the car back together. He's back in the lead of Pro 1500, crucially for him, with Austin Riley between him and his championship rival, Nick Persing, who currently leads the points. This is a great opportunity for Dyszelski to claw back what would be 10 points to Persing at the moment. Robert Soroka looking for another podium here in front of his home crowd. He sits 4th in Pro 1500. Mike Anzaldi having a good run, rounding out the top 5. Aurora Strauss back in 7th. Jack Yang hasn't been able to capitalize just yet on those dry tires. He sits in 9th. But you can see that track continues to evolve. It continues to dry up. And I think this, coupled with the safety car period, is just going to play into the hands of the guy that sits 4th on track at the moment, Mr. John Field in the 37 machine. He is going to take this restart. Yesterday he was saying that Al Miller was saying to him, I'm coming. Well, today John Field will be coming for the Indy Al Miller 500 machine.
Now you can pretty much put a target on the back of the 500 because the 37 will be coming, unlike the original start where it was still wet going into corner number 1. That wetness is pretty much gone at this point, so John Field will be able to get the maximum out of the full slick tire underneath that number 37. He has already laid down the fastest lap of the race, nearly by a full second over Indy Al Miller. So that is how much quicker at this point the slick tires versus the treaded tires are.
And you just know every driver on wets at the moment is feeling the seconds tick by. They know the sunshine's out on this track. We keep trundling around under the safety car, consuming more and more moisture, sucking it out of the racetrack surface. And their gamble, even though it was a safe one, isn't going to pay off today. Now, I did notice in Radical Cup Canada, most of the competitors, I think, had elected to start on the wets. So I think that's a pretty even field. But there are some guys that this racetrack is really going to come to. In Pro 1340, we'll just catch you up there. It's Robert Cipriani Dietrich, who took his first win yesterday. He is the leader over Ken Savage, who's extended his points lead over Seth Bacon and Jace Bacon. Ken, really the standout so far this season of Pro 1340. a rookie driver after competing in the Lucas Oil School series. And Ken winning a scholarship there, electing to use that cash to come and race in Radical Cup. Seth Bacon, Jace Bacon redeeming themselves in yesterday's race after finding the wall, finding the runoff, probably far too many times, according to their team anyway. The Crown Concepts guys really doing some work overnight to get those cars back on the racetrack, but the Bacon so far doing a solid job. Jace Bacon ahead of his father for the third step of the podium, and there's nothing like a father-son rivalry. We've seen it before with John Field bringing his sons out. The safety car is in pit lane. We're about to go green here. It's 30-plus cars line astern as they come around the final corners, and you can hear the revs rise in those turbocharged SR10s. It'll be Indy Almiller who takes the green flag first, but look for this 37 to come on through. And can Austin Riley get back in front of the Pro 1500s? John Field having a wiggle and a waggle as he heads into turn one. There's some out-of-place cars in that queue. And here we are, an opportunity for the 19 of Persing on the back of Austin Riley in car 20. And it's a huge cluster of cars as we head back in that field.
Very well put. A very big cluster as they work through turns 1 and 2 and finally get to stretch out a little bit down this Lakeshore straightaway and head into turn number 3. And that is a passing opportunity. Persing not quite close enough to Austin Riley is a little accordion effect. A couple cars hard on the brakes, and then others in behind had to jam even harder on the buttons.
There's a side-by-side crash and bash. It was a good job earlier in that pack because you could see the number 5 of Ken Savage to the outside. So there's just a bit of, I think that's precipitation falling off the barriers and the hoarding there. The signage on the side of the track. It's not more rain as Austin Riley has a slide. That's a change of position though, so he's been relegated to third place. Persing's coming through. There's John Field on the back of Wayne Williams. So the 4 front runners in the Platinum class running line astern. This is wild stuff. The tempo, and someone's in the wall. A big accident here. And a couple of Canadian cars in the mix there.
That's Hansen in the 16 who is involved. He's up against the wall. I believe that's one of the Bacon cars towards the bottom of your screen. The 42 of Kenny Reedman, who was up in a podium position, sits backwards up against the retaining wall. He didn't appear to hit it too severely, but he'll need to
there's
get it right.
A tap. And Indy Miller's been tapped into turn 3 as well.
No full course caution yet. We're still under green with 12 and a half minutes left to go as we're waiting to see if those cars can get moving in that accident site. I don't believe they will be. I saw some steam coming from what appear to be punctured radiators.
The concrete jungle has claimed some more victims. Kevin Poitras is in the wall as well.
It's on the entrance of turn number 8, the exit of turn 7, and now a full course caution for absolute mayhem around this racetrack. Kenny Reedman has managed to get it righted. He's in reverse, so he won't lose a lap, or will he? As he tries to get going, and the leaders will come through, so the 42 will go down a lap.
So that's the second to last corner. You can see pit lane just to the right of screen. Some of the crew members coming over to check on their drivers. The 16 trying to get it out of the wall. If we can clear these cars, and the 13, Arul Venkatesh also involved. We didn't even see him in that original melee.
So somebody hit the back of the 16 of Peter Hansen quite significantly. You can see the wing is absolutely folded on the Ricebeck number 16 as Kenny Reedman looks for an opening to get going.
Yeah, and these drivers doing a really solid job. This is heads-up thinking. Rather than get out of the car and throw your hands up in the air, they're all trying to get these cars out of the way to get their fellow competitors back racing. You can see there's a little bit of debris, and here we go. So what happened?
Here's a replay of what went down, and we're going to look for the initial contact, and it looks like it was the 16 of Hansen who originally went around, and then Bacon was caught up. Reedman went for a slide trying to avoid, and Everybody else came through. Jake Cowden nearly missed Kenny Reedman hard on the brakes, and Cowden in the number 9, who's been a front runner in the M Zone Radical Cup all weekend. Boy, he had some heads-up driving.
And Arul Venkatesh was just that was a hard hit for him. Innocent bystander there, had nowhere to go. I think the 16 just got out on the slightly damper edge of the circuit, and you could see he lost the rear end. We've got a car at the back of shot there coming down into turn 3 with smoke. There's surely a bit of bodywork rubbing on some of these machines. So the green race with all the action, well, you could see the tempo starting to rise. All of a sudden, guys getting confident on the track surface, racing for position. You had some of the Pro 1500s trying to carve their way up through the 1340 field. There was a great mix of Canadian cars as well. And
Kevin Poitras still stopped in the Platinum car. I believe that's Kevin.
Yeah, that's
on the exit of turn 7, in between turn 7 and turn 8. So it looks like he might have spun all by himself. And again, just coming to rest up against the concrete wall.
I don't know what ladder Kevin's walked under. The Black Cat was right next to him, because that guy has had more bad luck in the last couple of rounds than anyone deserves. He's a great competitor and has shown his speed in a number of different series, stepping up to the Platinum class this year. And Kevin Poitras, you know, he's got such a great temperament. He's had a big smile on his face, huge contingent of family here this weekend cheering him along. And Radical Canada got him back out for yesterday's race. It came down to the wire.
You can
he
see
needed a good run.
Corner marshals in turn number 11 are indicating to the drivers to pull to the outside. There is some debris. So as those cars pulled away from that incident site between turns 9 and 10, that they did leave debris, some bodywork, some fiberglass down on the racing surface. So that's going to require essentially a full lap from the cleanup crew to make sure all of that is picked up off the racing surface, because a little bit of fiberglass goes a long way as far as cut down tires go.
Now the person that is sitting pretty, of course, well, there's 4 of them at the moment, and that's the 4 class leaders. Louis Schreiber has found himself in front, and he will not want this to go back green, of course. He is in the box seat to get the top step of the podium here at the moment in the Platinum class. And in Pro 1500, it's Danny Dashelski who's in the lead. And then we're back to Robert Cipriani in Pro 1340. And as for the RCC?
Yeah, it's Owen Clark in the 70 who has benefited from all this chaos. He's now top spot. Jake Cowden had to whoa up drastically to avoid a spinning Kenny Reedman. So the 9 car sitting in second. Nick Rusakov, who makes his return to the M Zone Radical Cup Canada here this weekend, is finally flexing his muscle in the number 25, sitting in third spot. But really, it's just been a matter of staying alive and trying to keep your car in between the narrow concrete walls.
I just hope we can get this to go back green. These guys have put on a tremendous show for this big crowd throughout these couple of days. Of course, the third day of this event, the third race of the M Zone Radical Cup Canada, the Blue Marble Radical Cup as well. And you know, all of the drivers just want to light up the streets of Toronto one more time.
Just over 6 minutes left to go in this 35-minute timed race for the combined Blue Marble Radical Cup North America and the M Zone Radical Cup Canada, presented by Michelin. So there is still a little bit of time. You can see some of that debris has been cleaned up here on the front straightaway, which is good news. I didn't see if the Seth Bacon car was gone from that position in between 9 and 10. But it didn't appear as though that car was damaged too badly. They just seem to be having some issues getting the Poitras machine moved from turn 7. And this is not related to that incident between turn 9 and 10. This happened at a different time, but it seems to be some sort of, the Bacon machine is still there, and Seth is out right now, as we can see from the camera position. But the Poitras machine appears to have some running gear issues because they went to go pull the car, and it didn't seem to want to move, so it might need a tow, and that's kind of unfortunate because time is ticking.
Yeah, and that's Arul Venkatesh, who's managed to limp his way around to the starter pit lane. Good job by him to do that. Lucky 13, unlucky 13 in this case. So some stories throughout the field. Young Austin Riley looks set to take another podium here after leading this race. There he goes through on screen. The car 20, after leading this race early on, he fell victim, if you will, to Danny Dashelski and Nick Persing. Dashelski trying to claw his way back to the front of the points chart in Pro 1500. Robert Soroka, 2 Canadians in the top 4. Greg Gorski, who won yesterday's race, fifth overall at the moment. Aurora Strauss, who also found herself on the podium, 6th. So you can see the competitive nature of that class. In the M-Zone Radical Cup Canada, Owen Clark has found himself in front. Jake Cowden, what does he have to do?
He threw everything, including the kitchen sink, at Gavin Sanders through the first 2 races yesterday, including a number of pass attempts to the inside in turn number 1. Could not make it stick, and the number 9 came home second on the podium for those 2 races. But yeah, right now he was comfortably in the lead. Again, had to check up in that incident, nearly caught up the 42 of Kenny Reedman, and the number 9 sits second on track. So he's one of those drivers who is very much hoping we will get back to green, and it'll have to be a hurry because we have 3.5 minutes left now, so it's getting pretty tight.
Yeah, it is, and I'm sort of trying to remember here. For some reason, I thought Owen had a moment earlier in this race.
I thought so, too, and I'm trying to see the car with the damage that came through, and it might not have been Owen Clark who was involved in that. I thought I saw the 70 on the nose of it.
Yeah, I thought I did, too, but things can be deceiving from our position up here, watching a monitor, and, of course, the action has been thick and fast. It's been an exciting race. You can see here, Owen Clark is waving people by. I wonder if somewhere along the line whether he got out ahead of the safety car or something like that, where he's managed to effectively gain track position.
That could be. But he didn't stop when he got into that incident, and you can still see the bodywork flapping from the nose of that 70. He's knocked nearly the entire front headlight section off of that race car, and he is directly in front of the number 9 of Jake Cowden.
No, and maybe he was just checking up. Of course, at that moment, the front runners in the Radical Cup Canada would have been carving their way up through the Blue Marble field. So perhaps, he just running strong. And unfortunately, navigating some traffic, we could see that gaggle of cars. And the number 5 of Ken Savage had just done that tremendous move around the outside. So we take a look at a very, very bent left rear wheel on Seth Bacon's machine. Bacon's...
Oh, man, they've had a weekend to forget.
Tough day at the office.
Yeah, when the invitation comes to go to Toronto next year, the Bacons might say, you know what? Because Jace Bacon has had a major issue at one point this weekend. The crew worked feverishly to get that car put back together and get Jace back on track. And now Seth Bacon, unfortunately, is going home with bent parts in the number 3. We can say, though, Jace is sitting in a podium position in the 999, sitting 3rd in the Pro 1340s.
Yeah, and the clock's really ticking down here.
I don't think we're going to get back to green, not with the 3 cars still on track. We would have to be lights out on the pace car at this point. So it looks like this one will likely end under caution once again, unfortunately.
So it's a tough situation for these drivers. As I say, they've really enjoyed putting on a show here for all of the race fans that have come out and braved the weather themselves to be a part of the Honda Indy Toronto. It's going to be a wild race, I think, in the IndyCar. Some great action to come today. We're excited to stick around.
Yeah, so we can see the cars working around. On the plus side, the track's dry. You have a really clear, dry racing line. So any other series that'll come on track right now will be using full slick setup and a full dry setup as the sun continues to shine here at the Honda Indy Toronto, which is good news. And the clock continues to tick down. So it looks like, once again, as the drivers head over the start-finish line, this one will be called official very shortly.
Yeah, well, I think you
there
could
it is.
say, yeah, checkered flag is out. So congratulations to Louis Schreiber. His kids are here. Yesterday, he got covered in silly string on the podium. God knows what's in store for him today. The 111 of Louis Schreiber for Rhino Racing has taken the win from Wayne Williams, who's just starred all weekend long for S's Racing, the sprint car star, finding his feet in these high downforce prototypes. John Field in third, Indy Al Miller, after leading that race early on, relegated to fourth.
And as you mentioned, Jake Cowden has been put back ahead of the 70 of Owen Clark. So it looks like Owen Clark did make his way around the number 9 under caution, and that's why he was waving the 9 by. He wanted that position to be righted. Race control obviously radioing down to the 70. So we can tell you Jake Cowden finally steps on the top step of the podium here at the Honda Indy Toronto. Owen Clark will settle for second. Nick Rusikoff, first-time podium finisher here in the Honda Indy weekend, coming home in third.
And after tireless work by the Wisco Racing crew, Danny Dashelski has repaid the favor, taking the win in Pro 1500 from Nick Persing. That championship battle continues to run through this fantastic season. Austin Riley on the podium again in front of his home crowd. There's Dayglow yellow and blue liveried shirts everywhere around this racetrack. Come on down and celebrate your local drivers. We're going to spray some champagne soon in Pro 1340. It's Robert Cipriani Dietrich who's taken another win. It's 2 for 2, or 2 in a row at least for him. Ken Savage on the podium, and Jace Bacon, another trophy for him. Congratulations to all the podium place getters. Congratulations to both the Blue Marble Radical Cup and M-Zone Radical Cup for putting on a great show. Thank you to FEL Motorsports for making all of this happen. And if you want to check out Radical, want to understand how to get involved, radicalmotorsport.com. You too can get on the streets of Toronto, star in front of IndyCar crowds, whether it's at Laguna Seca, Barber, etc. It's a big opportunity for guys that want to come out of track days, country club racing, local racing here in Canada, and then step on up to the big time in front of IndyCar. radicalmotorsport.com.
Guys, great job. Tom Drewer, Dave Bradley with the call of the Radical Cup. Blue Marble Radical Cup. It was great to have them here. The M-Zone Radical Cup Canada here for the first time as well. Put on a great show this weekend. Unfortunate that we ended under yellow here again this morning, but still lots of great action with challenging track conditions and evolving track conditions as well. Podium ceremony set to take place shortly. On track in just a few minutes, the NTT IndyCar Series will be out for their final morning.